Hello, and thank you for joining us for Formulate and for this edition of Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Howard. I'm the executive editor here at Transport Topics. I'm joined by managing editor for features, Seth Clevenger, and features editor, Michael Fries. And we're here to talk about the practical considerations of rolling out EVs for your commercial fleet. A lot is said about the work that these trucks can do and how effective they are in, a lot of situations, certainly in local delivery, certainly in regional haul. And there are absolutely opportunities there where these trucks can and already are doing the work. But there's a lot more that goes into running a fleet and managing a fleet of vehicles, be they diesel powered, gasoline powered, or electric powered. And that's what we want to dive into today. And gentlemen, I'd say that at the top of that list is the charging infrastructure. A lot is said about this. Transport Topics has reported a lot about it. And in the infrastructure bill that President Biden signed last year, there are billions allocated to charging infrastructure rollout. But the big question, which many are asking, and there aren't a whole lot of answers to quite yet, is how much of that is really going to be allocated to and appropriate for charging commercial trucks. There's a lot of activity on the EV side in the passenger car market, and that's great for environmental goals. But as it relates to our business, getting that infrastructure built out for these trucks and is a big deal. So I'm just wondering, what do we think of, and what are you hearing about how much of this effort is going to go towards commercial trucks, and how much of it is really on the backs of the commercial trucking industry to build their own charging infrastructure at their own facilities, or turn to the truck stop chains, the warehouses, the places where these trucks go, and say to them, this is where we need some charging for these trucks.
Yeah, I'll take the first crack at that, Joe. What we see is that, of course, the commercial vehicle industry is, not as far along, the electrification path as the consumer vehicles, the passenger vehicle market. But what we see so far, with the early adopters, and there are a growing number of fleets, and it's not just the biggest fleets; it's also some mid-size operations, trucking operations that are beginning to roll these vehicles out and add them to their fleets and start to move into this this whole new vehicle type and this whole new type of fleet operation. And those early adopters, for the most part, are installing charging infrastructure on site, at their terminals where they're rolling this out. Sometimes it'll be a certain terminal where they really want to pilot it, to build, the operation and move into it. I mean, and that's a big investment, right? I mean, that's not just dipping your toes into it. That's making a big commitment. But they're installing the charging infrastructure for the vehicles on site at their locations for the most part. Oftentimes, they're working closely with a certain shipper, a certain customer that is very interested in it, and that also is driving some of the interest. Shippers that have bold sustainability goals and want to move toward electrification, they want to reduce their scope 3 emissions, and they're looking at their transportation and supply chain as a way to meet some of those goals. So that's how we see it developing right now before our eyes, and I think in the near term and longer term, I think as EVs start to gain more of a critical mass in the commercial vehicle space, that's where we'll start to see the need for more of public charging stations and infrastructure that's appropriate for commercial vehicles. So it's very much the early days, and I think that what we see now with some on-site charging infrastructure, charging station installations at company sites, and possibly at shipper sites and customer sites, is how we'll see it progress in these early days.
I think too, Joe, that with EV recharging infrastructure, no matter who gets into that game, be it the carriers or the warehouses, is that there's a lot of things to take in consideration, as Seth had pointed out, just kind of the necessity electric power. Where it's going to be used. It could be used with the the forklifts that are on hand, or the small equipment that's on hand versus of course the vehicles, those Class 8 vehicles. And then once that's resolved, you definitely have to talk to the utility companies, because there's a lot of known unknowns that these providers of the infrastructure will have to worry about, how that's going to affect their grid, how much energy is going to be used in the first place, and and most importantly, the infrastructure itself. And that's kind of the apparent pain point that's happening right now in the industry, where it's the fleets are or I guess it's implied that the fleets are going to have that particular advantage in providing that infrastructure, where we're seeing that now that it's it's the warehouses and the developers and the ones that own warehouse real estate that are getting into that space. So we don't know what that's going to look like in the world, in the landscape of transport, but that's definitely something that that's been witnessed, and I'm quite intrigued on how that's going to play out in the future.
Thank you for joining us. This was a Transport Topics Magazine Events Series production.